Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Gustavo Tolosa. I am in Dallas, Texas, as usual. And today we have a special guest, Dr. Doug Lyle, filling in for Dr. McDougall. As you know, this has been a very difficult week, and Dr. McDougall and his family are doing fine. They're safe. Dr. Lyle is going to make a little longer announcement so that you know how they're doing. And then Dr. Lyle is going to be talking about a topic of his choice, and we invite you to type questions for him. And then next week, Dr. Lyle will be back, and it will be a question and answer session. So I want to welcome properly Dr. Lyle. How are you doing?
Good. I'm doing fine, Gustavo. How about yourself?
Yes, very good. Very good.
Yeah, good to be here. It's obviously we're here on a little bit of an odd day where Dr. McDougall can't be with us. He's fine. Family's fine. Everybody's safe, which is obviously overwhelmingly the most important thing. But this has been really quite a catastrophe for Santa Rosa, and John and many people were evacuated in the middle of the night. I think the fire department knocked on their door and said, "You're getting out. You're getting out right now." So it's a good thing they did. A lot of heroic people making sure that people are safe. I mean, there's been a few tragedies where people did not make it, but for the most part, the area is orderly, and the streets are quiet. You know, there's no social disruption. Everything is fine, but there's a lot of smoke in the air, and the fires are still burning. So, but at least people are safe at this point. Dr. McDougall, obviously, a lot of people have reached out to me, and probably to you, Gustavo, and to a lot of us, Jeff Novick, and many people have asked me how they could help. They just feel like they've been helped a lot by Dr. McDougall, and they feel like they want to help. And this is obviously much appreciated sentiment. Right now, I think there's some things that have been set up online. That's not connected to Dr. McDougall as far as I know. So I think we're essentially discouraging that unless you want to donate to those things. But right now, there's no mechanism for any way for people to help, but we'll keep you posted on that if something gets organized. Okay, so basically, we appreciate Dr. McDougall appreciates the sentiment, and you know, this is a big thing to lose your home, but you know, he's okay, and Mary's okay. Everybody's all right.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Lyle. So you will, I think that the webmaster, I think it's Keith, will keep people posted by adding things to the website.
Right.
I believe that's why.
Very
so
good.
Everybody can check the website every now and then, drmcdougall.com. Well, thank you very much. And Dr. Lyle, you had some thoughts and things you wanted to share with us. So I'll just let you.
You know, when a tragedy like this happens, of any kind like this, it starts to get you thinking about some real basic things. I remember probably 30 years ago listening to my good friend Dr. Alan Goldhammer lecture, and I think it was a lecture called "The Basics" or whatever it was, and he got down to, hey, don't forget to wear your seatbelt. You know, this is a big deal. And my friend Rip Esselstyn will always talk to people about fires and fire alarms, and let's make sure that you're prepared. And so he has, obviously, his kids and his family, they go through little mock fire alarms like I did when I was a kid with my dad. And so these are interesting little details to healthy living. And in naturopathic medicine, they have what's called the first therapeutic order. So they have many therapeutic orders, and they get increasingly creative. But the first therapeutic order for naturopathic medicine really harkens back to Hippocrates and these very basic ideas that have huge potential impact on getting sick people well. So I thought that in the spirit of the basics, let's just talk for a moment about the basics and how important it is to touch base on those. I see many people where they are struggling with something and the basics are being skipped over. So the basics, sort of the first order here is your really basic important things, which are balanced diet, healthy diet, um, exercise, sleep, sunshine. And obviously, if you're where it isn't sunshining, then you have to watch your vitamin D levels and all that sort of thing. But these other three are very basic and very important. And very often people will be struggling with something physically or even emotionally, but they're skipping one of these steps. And so that's what we call the basics. When you start thinking about how many problems are essentially solvable, you by these very basic habits, good, clean habits, you start to realize that this is really the core of what medicine ought to be, which is the doctors reminding and instructing and counseling people about are we missing the basics? And so that's kind of what I'm interested in reminding people about today, because much of your mood and your health and how it is that you feel and how much you enjoy your life has to do with how well you are consistently taking care of these very basic first therapeutic order. So that's the sort of the opening gambit. And then if we have any questions, we can go from there.
Sorry about that. I had turned off the microphone.
No worries.
Very good. Very good. So do you want to continue speaking while people type questions? Is that okay? We're inviting everybody to go ahead and type any kind of questions in the chat, and Dr. Lyle will take questions.
While I wait for that, I want to point out that the way we live in a modern environment actually pulls you directly away from the basics. So, and that's what makes it so common that the problems that people face have to do with skipping over these things. And so certainly we all know about diet. So we know that the modern environment has created these supernormal foods, cheap, fast, easy, hyperstimulating foods that people will eat and want to eat and will eat in place of whole, natural, basic foods. So we all know about all the consequences of this, which are wide-ranging and very potent on individual lives. But we also have other things that are interesting. So we live in a world now where it takes almost no muscular effort in order to get about and do things and get what it is that you need. So people are usually not getting very much exercise, and often what they're doing is they're living their lives ergonomically in a way that's kind of unusual and certainly novel for our species. So sometimes in their work, they're doing the same repetitive motions over and over again in a stereotype fashion, or if they drive a lot in a car, they might not have very good posture with respect to that. They're not necessarily doing a real good job at stretching and doing some really basic movements that would be conducive to them maintaining good musculoskeletal fitness. And certainly as we age, it's a good idea to do things that are slightly challenging to the skeleton so that you get the little shocks that are necessary for keeping a bone strength. So this is why hiking is better than just walking around the block. Okay, so we're doing something where there's a little bit of challenge to the movement and a little bit of challenge to your balance to sort of shock the system very slightly. So for example, Dr. Alec Isabeau, who is our exercise doc at the McDougall program, will encourage various and sundry little activities like this if you don't have them easily available. Like if there's no place for you to hike or you live in a place where it's totally flat. He might have people, for example, jump off of a very small step if they're older and their bones may not be that strong. We might start with a little 6-inch step and just hop down off of that thing, and might do that 10 or 20 times a day. Those tiny little micro shocks are useful for strengthening your bones. And if you're younger and you're more vigorous, then you might want to jump from a little bit higher height and also find other athletic activities that result in some sudden and more vigorous movements. These are just these little things that our ancestors did. Our ancestors hiked. Okay, our ancestors were moving in diverse fashions, so they weren't doing a stereotyped movement over and over again at a desk. They were doing random movements using both sides of the body and essentially giving the system moderate challenges, which was useful for keeping up both the neurological integration and the musculoskeletal strength and coordination that would be involved in good health. So these are little details to the first therapeutic order, i.e. exercise, good diet, and then sleep. And so the modern environment also discourages people from getting a good night's sleep. The species didn't come about in a land with electric lights and television sets and computer screens and so on and so forth. And so one thing that can happen is that people essentially do not often work very hard physical jobs. They may work jobs that are pretty hard mentally, but not physically. As a result of that, they've actually got a little bit of residual energy. They're not really physically fatigued at the end of the day. And as a result of this, they've still got some steam. And if they look into interesting things on the internet or on the television, this can keep you awake. The lights are, whenever you're subject to light, it blocks melatonin production. And that's the hormone that builds up when the sun goes down that will then bring on a sleepiness and the ability to go to sleep. So when we block that melatonin production, we can extend our day. And by extending the day, then what happens is that people very often are winding up short of sleep. So when they wake up the next morning, they're not fully rested. And then what we get behind that very often is caffeine addiction. So, and again, these things aren't huge criminal behaviors, any of them. Obviously the diet, as Dr. McDougall has said more than 1,000 times, it's the food, that the food is going to be the major player here, which of course it is. But all of these things are important, right down to the seatbelt. So this is, as I'm reiterating the lecture of Dr. Goldhammer's from so long ago, he went out and laid out all of these little details. And at the end of it, I remember thinking, oh, I got to do a little better job at this. I got to do a little bit better job at that. But you also start to see that you can unwind many of these of the problems of life by attending to these details, consistently, and giving your body and your mind a chance to be fully fit and recovered each day.
Right. Thank you. Someone is asking here, once in a physical balance, don't other balancing activities come into play to keep on track, purpose, meaning, emotional connection, community, etc.?
Yes, these have to do with the more psychological side of life. And the psychological side of life is not entirely, but pretty much independent from the physical side of life in terms of healthy. So your life can be pretty miserable psychologically, but you could be perfectly healthy. And on the other hand, you can be very sick and be in pretty bad shape physically, but emotionally you can actually be in pretty good shape. So the connection between these two sides of life have been actually usually vastly overestimated by modern thinkers. It's a very sexy and alluring idea that our psychology has a big impact and importance for our health. It does not. Your psychology, this comes with a misunderstanding of the process of discomfort. So let's talk a little bit about discomfort and how discomfort works and what its purpose is. So when you are in physical pain, that's the result of some relationship between yourself and the environment that is inimical to the optimum functioning of the organism physically. So you're hurting, you may have inflammation, you may have essentially chemical imbalances in the brain. There's tissue under stress, etc. So you are not well and you're doing some suffering. Now, very often we're going to find that that suffering is going to give you behavioral cues as to what to do. So if you are nauseous, then you don't want to eat. Okay, so if you're very hot and you're being compromised by the temperature, then you want to get cool. So the systems are designed to physical systems are designed with signaling devices that will tell the organism what to do about the problem as best it can. So very often you'll see if a person is ill in a significant way, a lot of times they don't want to eat very much. They want to just hunker down and rest and essentially conserve their energies and keep themselves at a nice temperature, keep themselves safe, so that there's a minimum of energy being expended to basic survival problems. And this will then allow the organism to heal most effectively. Now, psychological pain, on the other hand, is something quite a bit different. So psychological pain is a signaling device to tell you that in general, your relationship with other people is in a there's problems and conflicts there. So this is where problems of esteem, the conflicts in relationships, self-esteem challenges, etc. These things can cause primarily the couple of emotions that they consistently will cause are types of depression or different kinds of feelings of depression and different kinds of feelings of anxiety. So these are the result of relationships between us and our social environment typically that are under stress of some kind. Now, those stressors are not designed by nature to be particularly harmful at all to the body. What they are is they're designed specifically, even though you have feelings that go throughout your body, and if you have a lot of anxiety, you can feel a lot of action in your viscera. If you're depressed, you might even be able to feel it in some ways in your physique. But it's not causing damage. Okay, these feelings are designed by nature to alert you to the fact that your relationship between yourself and, as I say, usually other people, it may not be other people. It may be that you're anxious about a volcano that you see, 20 miles away that's smoking. So that wouldn't be your relationship between you and other people. It'd be the relationship between you and your environment. Or if you're swimming and you see a big, nasty shark coming towards you, the feeling that you are feeling is the relationship between you and the natural world. But most of our feelings have to do with our relationships between us and other people. That's because people essentially survive and reproduce in social contexts. And so what other people think of us and what it is that we think that they think of us and what we're trying to do to improve or secure our relationships to other people, this is the core of human psychological life. And so the psychological pain that is resulting from stresses in social situations is designed by nature not to harm you physically, but to alert you to the fact that you could be needing to attend to the relationships between you and other people. And so that's what depression and anxiety and your life can become out of balance in many ways. One of those ways is going to be on the physical side of life with diet, sleep, exercise, sunshine. That's one way to get out of balance, and then the compromises will be physical. The other way to get out of balance in life is to have our relationships with other people, i.e. our village, to have those things in conflict or out of balance in some ways. And then the resulting discomfort is emotional. And that emotional discomfort is designed to get you to attend to those problems. It's very easy to see why people have confused the idea that emotional discomfort could be very damaging physically. And the reason why they might think so is because emotional pain can be felt pretty intensively in the body. and it's uncomfortable. So you can see how easy it would be for people to make the inference that if it's physically uncomfortable, that it's akin to physical damage. This is a mistake. Okay, so it isn't that we don't attend to and pay attention and want to understand emotional pain, but don't think that emotional pain is dangerous on the one hand, and also don't believe on the flip side that is a very common misunderstanding in the modern world, modern pop psychology, is that the notion is that being happy is healthy and that it's an important component of health. It is not. Okay, you can be very happy and things can be going very well, but if you are not attending to the first therapeutic order with respect to your body will be compromised as a result of that. So keep in mind, we've got two separate domains. Their overlap between them is effectively small. And but yes, the question that the person is asking is important for overall well-being. Certainly, we want to attend to the balances in the emotional side of life, particularly because when those things can become unbalanced, people's behavior on the healthy side of on the physical side of life can also become unbalanced, and then from there we can wind up with physical compromise.
Right. You know, and that's what I hear a lot for people that are struggling because they're trying to eat healthy and they're switching the way they're eating, and they're surrounded by family that don't support and that keep foods that are not good for them to have.
Sure.
And so they feel unhappy, and because they feel unhappy now, they go off the plan or things like that. And I would like to ask you, because this is a topic that I hear a lot and AJ hears a lot about people really struggling with, how can I live in my house with a spouse and children that are eating all this, standard American diet processed junk, and I'm trying to be healthy. Of course, JJ has this very good fast solution: just divorce him and leave. But so, Frank, what are some of? I know you've talked about this before, but if people struggle, and I think anything you can repeat or add to how they can deal with this toxic environment would be great.
Yes, it just turns out that I was talking to AJ yesterday about these very issues, and we had quite a discussion about this. And there's different mental tricks that can be useful for people, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. I want to pan the camera back and help people understand why this is difficult. It's difficult precisely because when you eat unhealthy food, it's not that unhealthy. The fact is that the long-term impact of unhealthy eating is relatively small with respect to your survival. So if you're 45 years old and you eat a hamburger today, the impact of that hamburger on your statistical likelihood of survival is almost zero. And so and as a result of that, you can notice that you are not going to be in acute pain. So acute physical pain is the signal that tells you made a mistake. So actually the pain signals are pretty subtle. And that's because the long-term effect is subtle. And so this is going to be an interesting problem. To try to pursue healthy living requires a conceptual leap where you understand that we're trying to go for a long-term important outcome. Because I've had many people say, well, I'm 30 years old. What do I really care what happens when I'm 70? Yeah, but then talk to a 70-year-old and it's unbelievably important to them. And so this is not the land of people of average conscientiousness. The McDougall program, a very healthy type of lifestyle, is the land of the people in the upper half of the distribution. In fact, the upper quarter of the distribution with respect to conscientiousness. People that understand that you want to take care of your teeth carefully, that you want to take care of your kids carefully, and you want to take care of your health carefully. And these things are under assault by our environment, which is filled with a population of people that have experienced nothing but supernormal stimuli with respect to their diet. And so even among family and friends, this is and we're getting social pressure now from the village. If you're in that situation, this is going to be hard. Now, there is hard and there is hard. So let's talk about this. And this gets to my Jedi mind tricks. Okay. So I will have people make comments from time to time that I find astonishing. And I understand what they're saying, but at the same time, I want to challenge it. So people will say things like, it's harder for me to get off of sugar than it was for me to get off of cigarettes. And I will tell them, no, it's not. People are notoriously poor at remembering situations. And so they don't remember how hard they fought to get off cigarettes. And generally, it was quite a fight. And this was no small process. Whereas getting off of refined sugar, let me put it to you this way. When we bring 40 or 50 people into a McDougall 10-day program, and we are taking people from a lot of times a fairly conventional diet, and we are moving them to an austere, really healthy diet, all we hear is mild grumbling from a few people. Now, I want you to picture 50 cigarette smoking addicts that we're going to lock into a room and not give them any cigarettes for a week. Now, I want you to tell me what you think about what their experience is going to be. It's going to be a very different experience. So it's going to be, they'll do it, they'll get through it, nobody's going to die, but there's going to be some sleepless nights, and there's going to be some shaking and some sweating and some haywire dreams. There's going to be a lot going on in that withdrawal that you aren't going to see anything remotely like that if people pass up the cheesecake and instead eat an apple. You will not get the same process. So now we say, yes, but it's just more difficult for me to hold it together. Right, that's true. There's little tiny decisions and pressures that are involved in trying to hold this together. That's why we call it the pleasure trap. It's a little trap. It's a little addictive-like process, but it's not the same thing as a big-time tough addiction. So here's a Jedi mind trick. So when I'll have somebody taking out their violin and playing me a tragedy about how hard it is, I will say to them, okay, suppose that you were in a prison in Nazi Germany and they told you that there's a grocery store that they're going to allow you to go to. And when you go there, there's whole natural foods all over that grocery store. And there's all kinds of junk in that grocery store too. And you can have all of the natural foods that you want, and you can bring them back and prepare them in your kitchen. And if you will do that for 30 days, we'll let you walk across that bridge and go to Switzerland. Is this a problem? No, it's not even remotely a problem. Okay, so it isn't the slightest bit of a problem. Whereas if you were addicted to heroin and they allowed you to use heroin, and you could choose to have that heroin during that time, that might be a very, very, very hard problem. All right. So this notion of that this is so possible and so difficult is actually very much this is very much a matter of perspective. It is actually trivial. Okay, this is a trivial problem to solve. The question is, how do we find the resolution to do it? And so from one perspective, we can say, oh my God, it's difficult. Well, the reason it's difficult is that the short-term prices are so low. Okay, that there's this is not cigarette smoking where you're coughing and hacking and choking out little hunks of your lung and stinking up the place, etc. There's a lot of pretty solid reasons why not to smoke. And so people make very hard concerted runs at trying to stop smoking. The problem is the drug's difficult enough that it will stop them very often, and it'll be hard. This will not stop you. This isn't going to stop you with withdrawal effects. That's not the problem. The problem is that the short-term benefits, short and intermediate term benefits don't seem like they're that high because you're not suffering that much. So they're very low grade and subtle. So it's hard to get yourself to make the commitment to get out of this trap. If you remain meandering in the trap, then the trap, is sticky and it will keep you in there. But if you brace yourself and you say, I'm just going to do it. I'm in the Nazi camp and they're offering me the keys to freedom right here. I can lose weight. I can get rid of my diabetes. They're not going to cut off my feet. I'm not going to find myself in a nursing home. I'm going to be trim. I'm going to be fit. I'm going to feel better about myself. People are going to give me better feedback. It's like, okay, that's the deal. The problem is right now, I'm sort of getting by okay, and I'm not really in a prison. I'm just kind of in a so-so situation that I'd like to improve. That's not that much motivation. So the question is, what's it going to take? Are you that motivated? And do you want to set your sights and determination to get this done? If you do, it's easy. It's very easy. So it's very simple. This is the frustration and encouragement that you will hear from the professionals on the other side of this divide. And that is, of course you can do it. Of course, it's got little details that will suck you into the swamp. We understand this. The question is your resolution. Do you want to pay this price? Okay. Do you want to finish your degree? Because if you want to finish your degree, you're going to need to go back to school. You're going to need to sign up for the courses. You're going to need to take the textbooks home. You're going to need to study them. You're going to need to show up for the tests. And you're going to need to do this over and over again for the next 2.5 years if you're going to get your degree. That's what's going to take. Okay. So do you want it? If you want it and you begin to pay the price, you'll get it. If you want to recover your health and you want to feel good, you want to wake up in the morning and feel good and be fit, then you can have that. It's right there. All you have to do is begin.
Well, that is Dr. Lyle. So true. I remember how I had gotten to the point where I was feeling so bad about myself, and physically and emotionally, it's like, because I was so overweight and felt so bad all the time, that by the time I got to the McDougall program, I was like, just tell me, I will do whatever. If I have to eat cardboard every day or the grass, I really meant it. Like, I was ready. And sometimes we have to get to that point.
Yeah.
To be able to pay whatever price it is. And actually, like you said, it wasn't that hard because the food tastes wonderful. And if you're not surrounded by an environment, like if I had gotten back home, so I didn't have to deal with another spouse or children that were eating.
Right.
But thank you for saying that, because the why, the reason does matter.
Yes. To summarize this, just because I can't, I'll run on for days about this.
Right.
The price is not high. Price is not high, but there is a price. Like, you can't negotiate your way out of the price. Okay, you can't do this. You actually have to go to the grocery store, maybe get out a cookbook or not, learn to boil water. That's all I know how to do. I boil water and steam vegetables. I boil water and cook spaghetti. I boil water and make oatmeal. That's the extent of my cooking abilities. Okay. So I've been to your house, Gustavo. I know that you know an awful lot more about cooking than I do. And, but you don't have to know much.
No.
And you just have to decide.
You do. Well, thank you. Dr. Lyle, can you talk a little bit about, because in your lectures, you often talk about when we go back home, how to deal with this confrontations or people that are, and you're saying you usually say to not be confrontational, to just say, well, I don't know where I get my protein, or different ways that you have for us to deal with. Are there any times when it is okay or advisable to be a little more confrontational?
I generally wouldn't. Um, I think that my attitude would be always that I think this is a good idea, but I'm not sure, and I'm just going to take it as it goes. And I think that I would stay in that position because that is what I call a position of power. Because it's a position of power when we don't put our stake in the ground and now we have to defend it. If you do that, if you put your stake in the ground and are determined to defend it, then the problem is that you are setting up a situation where you're right and they're wrong. And then they're highly motivated to contradict you. And they are going to find in a matter of an hour 500 experts with MDs and fancy degrees on the internet. They're going to tell them that they're right and you're wrong. It's trivial. As Dr. McDougall says, people love to hear good news about their bad habits, and there's good news all over the internet about their bad habits. And so I just feel like don't bother. Let's not put ourselves in that position. My attitude is, hey, I think there's something to it. I feel good. Seems to be working for me. Not sure it's right for everybody. And hey, might need to change it later. That is an absolutely unassailable position. There's nothing that they can say that you cannot basically dodge your way around. So once we essentially start a fight, we get their egos on the line, and now they're motivated to defend themselves, and now we've got a contentious situation. So even if you've caused a contentious situation in your social environment, you can still back up, as they call that in the political words of the day, they call it walking it back. Okay, that's a phrase I've heard now in the last year. But that's what this is. You can always walk it back. So no matter how much you have slammed this down your children's or your husband's throat, and now they fought back, you can still do what you're going to do. And when any cross-examination or negativity comes up, you can say, well, you could be right. And you can send a shock wave through their nervous systems of relief and excitement that they do not have to fight this battle with you anymore. And you can say, I'm not sure of anything. I'm just doing what feels good, and we'll just see what happens. And i.e., you're open to learning and changing, and you're just going to find out. It's also a position that they don't really have anywhere to go to try to talk you out of it, because the notion is that you're essentially running an open-ended experiment, and you're just going to find and learn as you go. And if it turns out that things go south, then you'll let the evidence tell you. You're just going to follow your nose to this and see what happens. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially, as I said, you cannot be defeated from that position. Right. It's essentially starting an argument by saying, you might be right, and I might learn something from this, but this is my opinion, but you could very well be right. If you start any quote argument with that, you take the wind out of the other person's sails because you cannot be defeated. And that's where you want to be with respect to any social problems with respect to diet.
Right. Unless I guess we all can tell if a friend or a relative sincerely means, and they are asking you to share because they need help. And I think we all can take the clues of the language and the gestures or whatever.
Absolutely. And so there's a time but let them do their own discovery. So that's where you hand them a book or a movie. You hand them Forks Over Knives, or you hand them, I don't know. I've only seen little bits of What the Health, but What the Health seems rather contentious. I think Forks Over Knives is not just because I'm in it, but I feel like Forks Over Knives is a it's a very even-handed and almost unemotional exploration
Yes.
of this,
Yes.
and that I feel like is very responsible journalistically.
Yes.
But certainly books, Start Solution, the anything by Dr. McDougall, Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Campbell. These are all Dr. Barnard. These are just excellent educational tools. So Dr. McDougall hasn't written a book on diabetes, but Dr. Barnard has. So if we've got a family friend, it's like, yeah, it's the same thing, same. All these
Right.
doctors are talking the same language, and here's this book on diabetes, and yeah, maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not. Seems like there might be something to it, and they can discover it for themselves if they're curious and interested. And then once again, we kind of have the situation where um, they're not trotting along behind us, and nor are they under scrutiny in their future dietary behavior between us and them, and that we told them, and they were
Mm-hmm.
even all excited about it, and now they're not doing it, and now they're uncomfortable around us.
Right.
Don't walk yourself into that. Just avoid the whole thing by having a an aura of humility and tentativeness about this that you may not fully feel, but it is still a very good position to be interacting with others.
Right. Right. It is. It's interesting. I have several times people have asked, and I have given them the movie or the best diet on the planet or the Start Solution, and
Yes.
some of them never read it, never saw it, and so that gave me the answer. Why
Yes.
would I start? But the other ones who did, and then they came up with questions. So yes, I would want to engage in a conversation with them.
Sure.
It's
Yeah,
a
and that's
great
a
way. It's a great
yeah,
way
and then
to do
it's
it.
just two curious people talking things through
Right.
where you've already got some knowledge and interest on the other side.
Some knowledge. Right. Exactly.
That's a much better place to be.
Dr. Lyle, one more question before we go. Someone here was asking, I don't know if you have any thing to say about this, and this is the first time I hear of. Can you give some thoughts on the effect of EMF, particularly wireless, on health and sleep?
On
Electromagnetic field.
Yeah, I'm not knowledgeable about this. I'm not real knowledgeable. I have people. There's been alarm bells that have been put off on this. I don't believe that, at least in the vast majority of cases, that there's anything to be worried about. The I did see a study that I think I'm going to be able to quote this data pretty accurately, and that is that in the days when people had their ears stuck to cell phones, that what they found that there was benign tumors, not cancer. I believe benign brain tumors were 4 times as likely of a specific type of benign tumor related to cell phone usage on the ear. But I want to point out for people what, before you run with this in panic, I want to give you a context that benign tumor without the cell phone use apparently takes place in 1 in 100,000 people. And with the intensive cell phone use, it was happening at 4 times per 100,000 people. So the tumors were benign. The increased likelihood was 3 per 100,000. In other words, and it's also now a thing of the past because people are using earbuds, to do this. They're no longer have their cell phones stuck to their ears. So we had a number of years of intense usage with the cell phones on people's ears, and there was no active cancers that were apparently related to this. So I think that we're probably going to find little tiny pieces like this little tiny piece that may be sometimes associated with certain conditions. That's going to be very rare, and the costs are likely to be very minimal. So the truth is that you're exposed to a lot of natural background radiation. in the world, and your cells are well defended against this. And so the kind of electrical fields that are generated by, for example, high power lines, I always think they look ugly and terrifying, and I wouldn't want a house under them. But the scientific evidence at this point has been very clear that they don't appear to pose any threat to humans. If they were any significant threat, the scientific evidence is good enough that it would be showing up as significant. And so, again, I'm not super knowledgeable in this area. I have looked into it. I have looked at the evidence. The evidence would appear to be the following. There may be a tiny bit to it, and so once in a blue moon, somebody may have something that may be impacted. But in general, the general broad swath of humanity is not going to be negatively affected by this.
Well, yeah, I mean, these are nice topics to talk about. We're always coming back to the reason our people are dying because they have diabetes and heart disease and everything. Right. It's the food. It's not because
it's the food.
No, they have
the food has in one of Dr. McDougall's books. It might have been his first one, or might have been the McDougall plan. I don't remember. He had a chart that was one of the most astonishing and simple charts of a concept that I've ever seen, and I've never seen it since. And that was, he talked about the molecular exchange between the human body and the environment. And so he talked about that there's a little bit of a molecular exchange in breathing. And there really isn't any with drinking water, effectively, because there's no molecular process there at all. The massive impact of the exchange between your body and the environment is food. It overwhelmingly dominates. You are made out of food. And so that dominates the show. These other things can have influences to varying degrees, but we will continue to find that the food is going to be by far the most important factor. Right.
Well, we're finding all sorts of distractions in the media and everything because, of course, the industry wants us to be thinking that it's okay to eat fried food and hamburgers and cheese and all that stuff.
But just don't own a cell phone.
Yeah. Guys, I see comments here. Yes, this may be detrimental. Please keep your focus on the problems here is food. Right. So let's focus on that first. But thank you for your opinion. And Dr. Lyle, we will see you next week. I think we're going to do a webinar as a follow-up for the webinar that we did last month. With questions. So very good. Well, thank you for the update on the McDougalls, and we will keep everybody updated as well.
Very good. Thank you, folks.
All right. Okay. Goodbye, everyone. See you next week.